Recognizing the Minister of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I move that the bill be read a second time now. Speaker, I am pleased to rise in the House today as Minister of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills to speak to Bill 18, the Sexual Violence Policy Act. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered today on the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. I stand before you today as a Minister of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills, but also as someone who believes deeply in the transformative power of education. Our colleges, universities, and institutes are places of learning, of growth, of discovery. They are places where young people come to find their voices, to shape their futures, and to build our communities. But for far too many, these spaces have not always been safe. Let me share a story. It's not a single story, but a reflection of many. It's the story of a student, bright, ambitious, full of promise, who experiences sexual violence on campus. In the aftermath, she feels isolated, unaware of where to turn. She worries about being believed. She fears retaliation. She questions whether her institution will support her, whether justice is even possible. This story is not fiction. It's real, it's lived, and it's wholly unacceptable. Sexual violence is never acceptable, not in our homes, not in our workplaces, and certainly not in our post-secondary institutions. Today, we are taking another step forward in changing this story. Since 2017, every public post-secondary institution in British Columbia has been required to have a policy in place addressing sexual violence. This was a critical first step. Our understanding of sexual violence has evolved since then. We've continued to listen to students, faculty, staff, Indigenous and Métis partners, and community organizations. We've heard about the gaps in our current framework. We've heard about the barriers that survivors face when trying to report incidences. We've heard about the need for trauma-informed approaches, for transparency, and for accountability. And we have acted. Over the past 2 years, our ministry has undertaken a comprehensive review of the Sexual Violence and Misconduct Policy Act. We held consultations across the province with student societies, sector associations, unions, Indigenous and Métis partners, and community-based service organizations. We asked hard questions, and we listened to difficult truths, and we committed to doing better. The result of that work is what brings us here today. Today, I am proud to stand and support Bill 18, titled the Sexual Violence Policy Act, new legislation that replaces the previous act and marks a significant step forward in our collective efforts to prevent and respond to sexual violence in post-secondary communities. This legislation is more than a set of rules. It reflects our values. It is a declaration that every person, student, staff member, faculty member, contractor, volunteer, or board member, feels safe, supported, and empowered. Let me walk you now through what this new act will do. First, it expands the scope of sexual violence policies beyond students. For the first time, institutions will be required to include all members of their community, faculty, employees, contractors, volunteers, and board members, because sexual violence does not only occur between students, and our protections should reflect that. Second, it strengthens consultation requirements. Institutions must engage meaningfully with their communities when reviewing and updating their policies. This includes forming an advisory committee, which must include students and community members to guide their policies, because policies must reflect the lived realities of those that they are meant to protect. Third, it enhances transparency and accountability. institutions will now be required to make annual reports on sexual violence policy implementation and make it publicly available. These reports must include information on prevention, awareness, and response initiatives by the institutions, because we know that transparency builds trust. Fourth, it reduces barriers for survivors. The Act provides institutions with express authority to share information about interim measures and case outcomes with survivors. This addresses long-standing concerns about privacy and ensures that survivors are not left out in the dark about the outcomes of their cases. Rather, this process centers survivors and provides them with greater autonomy in the reporting process. Fifth, it establishes consistent standards province-wide. The Act expands the government's regulation-making authority, allowing government to set clear, consistent expectations for all public post-secondary institutions, because safety should not depend on where you live and how an institution decides to implement standards. These changes are more than just legislative, they're cultural. They send a clear message that sexual violence in any form is unacceptable, and we will never tolerate it. All of this being said, we also recognize that this can't be accomplished through legislation alone. That's why, alongside the new Act, we are launching the Sexual Violence Action Plan, which is a comprehensive roadmap to guide our efforts in prevention, response, and support. The action plan includes 12 concrete actions under 5 strategic priorities. First, lifting up Indigenous approaches. We have worked with Indigenous partners to develop intersectional training resources that reflect Indigenous knowledge systems and support reconciliation. We are setting standards to ensure policies are responsive to UNDRIP, the calls to justice, and the calls to action. Second, increasing prevention through awareness and training. We have provided training resources tailored to the needs of international students, graduate students, and those affected by technology-facilitated sexual violence. We are establishing education and training requirements for institutions to address sexual violence proactively. Third, we are improving institutional responses. We are developing guidelines for trauma-informed investigations, creating a roster of trained investigators, and setting standards for accountability measures. Institutions will be required to communicate transparently with survivors about the status and outcomes of their investigations. Fourth, we are improving data collection and reporting. We have released a toolkit to help institutions prepare annual reports, and we are creating a schedule for future iterations of the Student Perceptions of Sexual Violence Survey and committing to publishing the results. And fifth, we are strengthening privacy and confidentiality. We are developing standards of confidentiality in cases of sexual violence and providing guidance on the use of non-disclosure agreements. So 3 of these actions, which are developing training resources, releasing the reporting toolkit, and creating intersectional supports, are work that has already been completed. This legislation will support the implementation of several others, and we will continue to work closely with our partners to complete the rest. This action plan is more than a document, it is a commitment, and it is a promise to survivors that we see you, we hear you, and we are acting. This work does not exist in isolation. It builds on the broader efforts of our government to address gender-based violence across British Columbia. We are proud of the Gender-Based Violence Action Plan and the Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity and the Gender Equity Office. We are proud of the legislative amendments to Bill 17, the Intimate Images Protection Act, which strengthen protections against online sexual harassment and non-consensual image sharing. And we are proud of the partnerships we've built with the Ending Violence Association of BC, the AMS Sexual Assault Support Centre, and countless others who have contributed their expertise, their passion, and their lived experience. And we're proud of the progress that's been made so far, because since 2017, our government has invested over $2 million in sexual violence prevention and response in post-secondary communities. We've developed open source training resources, enhanced reporting systems, supported rural and remote campuses, and reached out to students to better understand their diverse experiences. The results speak for themselves. In our most recent survey, 88% of students said they feel safe from sexualized violence in their post-secondary communities, which is up from 78% in 2022. We are making progress, but we know that there is still so much more to be done. There's more to be done, and we will continue to do more. We will continue to work with institutions as they implement these changes, even in the face of financial pressures. We will support our institutions by providing guidance, training, and tools to help them better support survivors. We will monitor implementation. We will hold institutions accountable. We will ensure that survivors have access to the support they need, whether through campus services, community organizations, or provincial resources such as Here to Talk and Victim Link BC. We will continue to update our annual sexual violence awareness campaigns to reflect best practices and sector needs. Preparations for the 2025-2026 campaign are already underway, with a launch anticipated in early 2026. And we will keep listening because this work is never done, because the needs of survivors evolve, because our understanding deepens, because our commitment must be unwavering. Today, I invite each of you in this House to join us and support this bill. Join us in building a culture of safety, respect, and inclusion across British Columbia's post-secondary sector. Join us in standing with survivors, in believing them, in supporting them, and in fighting for them. Join us in ensuring that every student, every staff member, every faculty member, every community member knows that they matter, they are protected, and they are not alone. Together, we are rewriting the story. Together, we are building safer futures. And thank you for your support. I really do look forward to have support from our entire House in forwarding this very important legislation in this House. Thank you.